Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now every time I fire up my PC with my GTX 1080 Ti inside, I can't believe how good it still is in 2022, even at higher resolutions like 1440p. That said, with the stock levels of 30 series cards improving and the cost of used cards dropping all the time, you might finally be tempted or actually able to upgrade, and that got me thinking where the next sort of logical step forward is for someone with an old flagship like the 1080 Ti. Now I've got to be honest, I find it hard to recommend upgrading anyway. It's still brilliant at 1080p, fantastic at 1440p, and it can still hang in there at 4K, providing you manage your expectations a little bit when it comes to the graphical quality settings. Recently, however, you probably know that I purchased a 3060 Ti, and I couldn't help but wondering, during my week or so of usage now, just how well it compares to the older 1080 Ti. I mean, that thing is a once-in-a-decade GPU. It really was special when it came out, and it continues to be a fantastic card even in 2022 with modern titles. I might as well have not made the comparison. I might as well have just said if you've got a 1080 Ti, keep it. But we've got this far, so we might as well carry on, because I think now with prices the way they are, stock improving, a lot of people are going to be wondering whether or not upgrading to a 3060 Ti, a card that's lower down in the lineup of 30 series cards, well, they're going to be wondering whether or not it's worth it if they've already got a flagship. So enough chit chat, let's get into some gameplay results. I'll be testing the cards with my newly acquired, thanks to Intel, i5-12400F. So let's take a look. Now going into the benchmarks, and I was pretty certain that the 3060 Ti would be the better performer, not just at 1440p but at any resolution. I chose 1440p because it's a nice middle ground for both of these cards. While I was certain that the RTX would come out on top, I couldn't predict by how much this would be the case, though sometimes the differences were both larger and smaller than I was anticipating, on a game-by-game basis. My test specs include an i5-12400F and 16 gigs of 3200MHz dual-channel DDR4. In Cyberpunk 2077, the 3060 Ti outpaced the 1080 Ti by an average of 15 frames per second, which could mean the difference between playable and unplayable for some, given that the 60 FPS threshold is hit by one card and not the other. This is something that could easily be remedied with a lower resolution or a few tweaks in the settings with the 1080 Ti. The percentile lows also differ somewhat. That said, the 1080 Ti is certainly no slouch even today, and it truly remains an excellent option. The games I chose all have built-in benchmark runs, though the footage you're seeing is of course from actual gameplay because it's, well, less boring than watching benchmark runs, plus the differences in performance between the cards can also be picked up on here too. That remains the case with Far Cry 6, which, while it runs really well on the 1080 Ti, performs even better with the RTX. Again, it goes without saying really, but the older card still holds its own. I wouldn't be too concerned with upgrading just yet actually, but if you do want to, then going from a 1080 Ti to a 3060 Ti is still worth it, especially as you could still get a decent price for the aging flagship GTX on sites like eBay. In Forza Horizon 5, both the 1080 Ti and 3060 Ti handled the game very well. I really can't fault either GPU here. I mentioned before that upgrading from the 1080 to the 3060 would still be worth it, but the more logical step would probably be a 3070. That's an upgrade I made myself a while ago before giving my 3070 away, but I must admit that a 3070 with a 1080p monitor was a little bit overkill, to say the least. 1440p makes far more sense, but when it comes to games like Forza here, 4K shouldn't really be a problem either. The same can be said for both graphics cards. Forza Horizon 5 is very well optimised actually, and while we certainly could have increased the preset a little bit more, it still looks very nice with the unchanged high graphical settings. This result is perhaps the most interesting. GTA 5 ran almost identically with both the 1080 Ti and 3060 Ti. There were a few variations, a couple of small variations in fact, with the averages and percentile figures, but the game didn't feel any better to play with one card over the other. The performance was faultless with both. and I was quite surprised by this. Whether things will change in different areas of the map, I can't say for sure, and perhaps online will cause some more differences. It's more CPU intensive in that regard though, so I believe as long as you've got a solid processor, you really can't go wrong with either the older GTX card or the newer RTX card at 1440p. This is when you tell me there's some sort of cap I've neglected to remember on the frame rate or something like that, some sort of FPS limitation that I've forgotten about. Finally, it's Red Dead Redemption 2. Both cards will offer a solid plus 60 frames per second experience with the Xbox One X equivalent settings at 1440p, and both will even exceed this figure in terms of the percentile lows, with the 1080 Ti dropping ever so slightly below this when it comes to the 0.1% low. There's nothing about either scenario that can be spoken of negatively, however, with both cards offering a really good experience today in pairing with my i5-12400F and 16 gigs of RAM. If you've got a 1080 Ti and don't have the money to upgrade, or you just don't want to, then don't worry, because it's still a fantastic card. If you are shopping for a solid 1440p experience and can't quite afford a new RTX 30 series GPU, then the best of the GTX lineup is still a worthy choice, especially if you don't mind the lack of DLSS support and ray tracing. The lack of DLSS, while not a huge deal right now, might start to be missed a lot more as time goes on, and I think that this will ultimately affect its longevity. Hopefully, we'll see more and more newer games implement FSR or FSR 2.0 though, which will be somewhat of a saving grace for the continuously capable 1080 Ti in the future. It's still a really good card, but only time will tell how long it can be referred to as such. And as for the 3060 Ti, well, that's a solid option as well, especially if you're building a new PC and want all the latest features. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of both cards down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.